heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View starts right now.
Across America, live, this is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Thank you for joining me. It is the Thursday edition of Point of View, and we're going to talk about how really to grow in the Christian life. We're going to be talking about this wonderful book, Rooted and Resilient, A Minister's Guide to Thrive. But as I said yesterday, whether you are a Christian minister, Christian leader, all of us are leaders in one sense, and I think you're going to learn some great principles that will help you grow in your Christian faith. In studio with me, first of all, a good friend, Byron Barlowe, who's been in ministry for more than 4 decades, much of which was with Campus Crusade for Christ, now called Cru, and also with Probe Ministries. And Byron, it is always great to have you in studio.
It's so good to be here again. Thank you so much.
Come back and talk about why you're here in just a minute, because the author of this book is with us, and that is Dr. Eric Willis. Individual is founder and executive director of Reclaim Leadership. We have a whole bio here, and as we get to know him a little bit better, we'll learn about his unconventional path to ministry, to eventually getting his doctorate, the whole aspect of this ministry that he has right now, which we have information about in terms of Reclaim Leadership. So, Eric, welcome to Point of View.
Thank you, Kerby. Great to be here.
Byron, let me come to you, because a lot of people might say, okay, you normally just do the interview with the author, but you're the one that told me about this book. As I dipped into it, I said, well, this is a book not just for leaders, although any pastor, Christian leader certainly needs to pay attention, but this is really something that has helped nurture you, and one of the reasons why you brought it to my attention.
Wonderful, yeah. I met Eric. He's on a first-name basis with me now because he's my coach. But I met him at a coaching conference. We did a little exercise together in a session. And I said, wait a minute, this 6'5" guy's got some substance to him. And I thought, maybe I should get his card and see if I can't get some coaching from this fella who used to be a pastor.
Yes. At
a local church. Very large church, and he will tell you more about it, but they went through something that was pretty difficult as a group. Mm-hmm. And he has written about it in several ways. I really have benefited from one other book of his called Sacred Conflict, which, if you'll think about the title, is quite the thing. That ought to get people to read it itself. But I have benefited so much, especially from editing the book. So we did a little trade. Mm-hmm. Eric and I said, well, how about some coaching for some editing?
Yes.
So when I found the book to be as substantial as it was and as pragmatic as it was, I said, oh my gosh, no. This is not going to just go to pastors, please. So the initial audience that he had in mind, which is very wise, very focused, is a small church pastor, maybe a large church too. But I said, no. We have parachurch workers by the tens of thousands. We have lay people. We have folks who are getting trained by organizations all over the place. And we just have people who naturally, supernaturally do ministry. They will all benefit from this book.
Again, Rooted and Resilient. And again, we have a link to reclaimleadership.org. So if you want to know a little bit more, there's a place where you can get an assessment. There's some ways in which you can sign up for their newsletter, maybe even have you come and speak. But Eric, let's hear your story for just a few minutes, because we've already heard a little bit about the fact that you've been a pastor in many cases, but came from being a college dropout to Dr. Eric Willis. You got to tell the story.
That is a journey, isn't it? Yeah. I went to college, and I wasn't mature enough to handle it. Yes. And so I dropped out of college. The best thing that came out of my first college experience was getting to meet my wife.
Yes.
So there's
good one.
There's a benefit.
Yeah.
But yeah, I spent years actually telling myself I was disqualified from being used by God because of a lot of decisions I made in that season of my life. And being disqualified and telling yourself that and believing that, God had something different in mind. And so he came and made it clear to me that I'm not disqualified from being used by God, but pre-qualified. I had experienced some things that he desired for me to be a pastor to pastors, to come alongside those in ministry leadership who get to the point where they say, God, if this is ministry, I don't want anything to do with it.
I understand that.
And then I get the privilege to come alongside to infuse hope and biblical perspective to help them stay their course. And so my educational experience has lent itself to learning more and diving deeper into understanding psychology, understanding humankind, understanding theology. And the doctorate is a doctorate in education with an emphasis on organizational leadership, specifically related to positive leadership.
And again, this is a very good book on the leadership issues. And I might just mention you speak at Right Now conferences, the Timothy Project Conference, Peacemaker conferences, and much, much more. And people might want to have you come to their church. But Byron, for just a minute, talk about how this has been helpful to you, because in some respects, you are a perfect illustration of why people might want to get a copy of the book.
Well, you know, that's interesting. I just got back from a training of men's ministers. So we're training trainers, guiding guides, coaching coaches. And so I said, wow, that's a perfect time to give a gift to those guys that will keep on giving. And it's really a field manual. One of the most incredible things about it is, well, it's not incredible, but it's very, very wise, is that there is not only a case being made biblically, theologically, for positive psychology, but there's also a lot of things that Dr. Willis has put in regarding how that comes out of Christ and the Scriptures. So we make a scriptural case per se, like there's really Bible about this. Also, one of the things that helped me the most was there's a personal assessment.
Yes.
And I have permission from the author to use that in my coaching.
Yes.
Even as a client-based coaching. So I said, guys, you need this book because it helps you not with the same old stuff that you could have figured out on your own. And somebody just had a publication with a list that you could have made up. This is substantial stuff. And for example, there's a place in here with a trigger. It talks about your next emotion isn't just a feeling. It's an investment in your future. Now, if that isn't positive, I don't know what is. Never thought of it that way. But then there's a chart. Triggers, thinking, and outcomes. Charts, bullet lists, assessment. How to do this in a way that is a bit different from what you're usually getting in religious circles.
And again, I love the charts. And of course, I've oftentimes had people say, a picture is worth 1,000 words. Sometimes a chart or a diagram is worth 1,000 words. So that is the case. We're coming to a break, and I want to come back and in just a minute encourage you to get something to write with, because I want you to write down the words PERMA, P-E-R-M-A. We'll get into that in just a minute. But let me just give you an overview of the book, because we are talking about 10 chapters and 5 that talk about the roots of a thriving ministry, and then 5 chapters on the heart of a resilient leader. And we'll kind of break it down to each one, but in just a few minutes, you're going to learn a little bit more about positive emotions, about meaning, relationships, gratitude, hope. There are just so many things that run through this, and I think this is going to be a very helpful book for you. If you're in leadership, I can't imagine where you wouldn't want to have a copy of this, not just to put on your shelf, but to read on a regular basis. So we're going to come back and talk more about Rooted and Resilient right after these important messages.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Chris Reese is the managing editor of the Worldview Bulletin newsletter. He was on my radio program recently to talk about his article, Resurrection and the Fear of Death. In discussing the importance of the resurrection to the Christian faith, he later turns to the futility that secular philosophers experience in attempting to find meaning in life. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul describes what the gospel consists of by listing 2 foundational elements. Christ died for our sins, and he was raised on the 3rd day. Both events happened in accordance with the Scriptures. This was an early creed used by believers that Paul included in the letter. Chris Reese goes on to quote from secular philosophers who don't believe in God and don't believe in the resurrection of Jesus. Naturalist philosopher Alex Rosenberg answers some of the basic philosophical questions in this way. What is the purpose of the universe? There is none. What is the meaning of life? Ditto. Why am I here? Just dumb luck. Is there a soul? Are you kidding? Another physician talks about trying to resolve his fear of death intellectually, but concludes that it can't be done. Atheist professor Andrew Stark argues that after all the reasoning and all the rationales, I still desperately prefer to be a conscious, healthy human being than a corpse. Who wouldn't? Of course, the resurrection of Jesus does provide hope. The Apostle Peter declares that God has given us a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, that your faith and hope are in God. We should be grateful that our hope rests in the historical fact of the resurrection, and this should stimulate all of us to share the good news with others. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again talking about the book Rooted and Resilient, written by Dr. Eric Willis as well as Byron Barlowe in studio. And we talked about this idea of PERMA, and the P stands for positive emotions. Eric, can you give us some perspective on that? Because you start by talking about the importance of positive emotions. I think we sort of intuitively know that, but you reinforce that in the way in which you write this.
Yeah, positive emotions is the first of the PERMA model that it's built on. Dr. Martin Seligman's theory of well-being, his pursuit of happiness from a psychological perspective. And what I like to do is first, we have an allergy to positivity in Christianity, and I want to speak to that because in our culture, there's a positivity culture that needs to be addressed. The whole wake up in the morning, look yourself in the mirror, and tell yourself how awesome you are. I want to push back on that and remind you you're not.
Yeah.
But God is. And so let's reframe this positivity in context of God's character. And so the positive emotions, the first in the PERMA model, is fueled by gratitude. I like to say that gratitude is the ultimate reset, as we are
Very true.
Grateful, not so much for circumstances, right? But we are grateful for the character of God within those circumstances. He's consistent all the way through. Positive emotions is an opportunity for us to allow joy and peace, contentment. You know, the Apostle Paul talks about being content. How's that true? How could he do that, right? It wasn't the circumstances. It was the character of God and his understanding of Christ. So positive emotions are fueled by gratitude is how I like to say that. I can go on with the other
Yeah, you might just
PERMA.
give an overview. That would be good
Sure.
because I do want to hear from Byron. But this whole PERMA thing is really important because it's kind of key to your book, isn't it?
It is. It is the rhythm of well-being. So personal well-being, positive emotions, and then there's engagement. Hope sustains engagement. That's how they connect together. And then relationships. Positive emotions, engagement, relationships, meaning, and achievement. That's the PERMA model. And relationships, forgiveness is huge. Forgiveness protects relationships where needed. And then optimism deepens our meaning and also drives achievement. So that's how the 4 traits of resiliency connect to the PERMA model, and how we can be rooted and resilient.
I encourage people to kind of write that down, PERMA, P-E-R-M-A, and we'll get back to it in just a minute. But when we talk about positive emotions, sometimes we have trouble loving ourselves, don't we, Byron?
I think that's endemic. I think that most Christians resonate with something like the old, I just want to push a mop in the kingdom of God, and that's good enough for me. No, it's not. No, it's not. That's not Jesus's point of view. He spent more time talking about rewards than anything else. Maybe money is more. I love one of the theses, probably the primary thesis of the book is it's not selfish. Self-care is not selfish. And here's a quote from the book. Your well-being isn't selfish. It's strategic. So I love the way that imbues not only an okayness, that permission to take care of ourselves, but also the fact that Dr. Willis has noticed and promoted the fact that there is something greater involved. So there's a bigger story involved. There are objectives and goals that just give us so much meaning in our lives. So I'm coaching a young man now who's concerned about the substance of his life. Was a young father. He's he's in his company as a 30-year-old, but he doesn't like his company. So this is the sort of thing that could help a guy just trying to make decisions about his career. Mm-hmm. You mentioned loving others as yourself. That is something that I think the phrase at the end is often negated, or at least left out. If we're loving others as we love ourselves, the assumption is we're loving ourselves. Well, we need to do it well. And this book helps me have skill in remembering how to do that.
One of the other things that maybe fits is just thinking about this young man that doesn't like his company, and engagement is about finding a sweet spot. Now, I love playing tennis, and you know that if you hit it in the sweet spot, you'll be much more effective. And I've heard people say that if you're in the sweet spot with your gifts, your passions, and your calling, it almost doesn't feel like work. And that is the second E that we need to talk about. First, positive emotions, but then E for engagement.
Engagement is essential, right? It's how you show up. And all of us have competencies. And so we can talk about competencies all day long. As a matter of fact, most of the time when we're in positions that we're not necessarily fulfilled in, it's because we're expressing ourselves in competencies not within our passions. It's when our competencies and our passion collide that we have a calling. And engagement is an opportunity for you to do a self-assessment. Am I engaging only in my competencies, or am I engaging in my passion? And there's an assessment process that you can take for that.
And again, Byron, we've seen this before. People in ministry that are outside of their giftedness, and they're the administrator of the church or of a parachurch, or they don't have a gift for teaching, and yet they want to be in ministry. It seems to me that sometimes if you do a good assessment, you'll be able to find that sweet spot, and sometimes you have to go through half your life before you find it accidentally, and this is a way in which you can find it much quicker, can't you?
I believe so. And my goal with young men is to help them not have to wait till their retirement age to start figuring all this out. And this kind of a book actually gives not just a to-do list, because I think that the worst thing that someone can start with is doing. And that's programmed in everything we do, athletics, right. Boy Scouts, our jobs, even our education. Well, it's one thing to say being before doing. Let's be and become, like Dallas Willard said. It's who I'm becoming that matters the most. But you got to do some stuff to do the becoming.
Right.
So here's some guidelines on, okay, what are the things I can do to set myself up with spiritual disciplines? And how far does that apply? Is that just when I have my quiet time or just when I do church stuff? No way. Again, back to my young man. He's thinking about his career, not only for his family's sake, but for his own, as you say, passions.
Mm-hmm.
Where does that align? And how do I know what alignment even looks like?
Yeah.
How would I get there? That's what you get with this book.
Again, P, E, and then R is relationships. Now, this one we could preach on all day because you have sections on boundaries, conflict skills, which, of course, you've dealt with as well, peacemaking, in some respects, knowing how to even be involved in forgiveness in ministry. That is a very big issue, but let's see if we can at least give it an overview and then cover it in more detail after the break.
Yeah. So relationships, relationships, and those who are in ministry leadership or have spiritual influence over others are kind of caught in a catch-22 situation where you have to care for the people you're ministering to.
Of course.
And yet the people we minister to are often the ones that hurt us the most deeply. And so forgiveness is a huge piece of that. There is so much to cover in this concept of forgiveness. I do want to mention I enjoy raising people's eyebrows by some of the things I say. For example, an apology is not a biblical concept. An apology, as we use it today, taking personal ownership of an offense, an apology is just the handle that we turn to open the door to confession and repentance. That's the biblical concept. And so too often we stop at apology when we need to move into confession and repentance. So relationships can be healed, relationships can be restored and reconciled if we're intentional with forgiveness.
Again, the website is reclaimingleadership.org. Let me encourage you to go there and find some of the material that is available, infusing hope and perspective with a focus on well-being for the spiritual leader. And all of us are leaders in one way or another, and these principles apply whether you are in a position of leadership or you're just leading your family. And so, again, we'll come back and talk more about relationship because this is a big issue, but we already have talked about forgiveness and a number of other aspects. So if you find yourself along the way, maybe wanting to ask a question, we will open up the phones in the second hour, give you a chance to ask a question, although I suspect most of you are just going to be taking some notes, and you can certainly do that as well. Go to the website, pointofview.net. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
Have you ever met a child you knew would do great things? They displayed remarkable imagination, understanding, and a zest for learning. Now imagine someone takes that child and instead of fostering their potential with a real education, they feed them nothing but lies. You know, that scenario isn't so far from reality. From a young age, Americans are fed a consistent stream of distorted facts, from the secular indoctrination they receive in many public schools, to the biases presented as fact in many colleges and universities, to the barrage of misinformation from the mainstream media and the lack of moral grounding in our society. It's not that Americans aren't capable of understanding the truth, it's that they aren't exposed to it enough. You can expose more Americans to the truth when you give to Point of View, where listeners receive facts, perspective, and biblical truth they don't get from society. As long as we have truth, we have hope. Give today at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151. Pointofview.net and 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back once again, let me just mention that over the last couple of days, of course, we've been raising funds for our fiscal year end, and we decided yesterday to extend that. And so if you are still interested in supporting this ministry, and I hope that you are, even if you're appreciating some of the conversation we're having today with Eric and Byron, go to the website, pointofview.net. You can click on that button that says Restoring America's Godly Heritage. There's a button that says Give Now. We still have some match on the table. So it's a dollar for dollar match. Your gift of $100 becomes $200. If you decide to join us at the Truth Team level, $1 a day, $30 a month. That $30 a month becomes $60 a month. So you can go to the website, pointofview.net. And of course, let me give that phone number, and we'll give it before the end of the program here. 1-800-347-5151. 1-800-347-5151. We certainly do need to hear from you. We are excited about the response that we've had from some of you, but I know some of you are traveling, maybe didn't hear the program, haven't been able to actually take the time to make that phone call or go to the website. We still have some match, a little bit of match left on the table, and that is something we would encourage you to do. In studio with us today, Eric Willis as well as Byron Barlowe. And Eric, I thought I'd come back for just a minute because we're talking about everything from gratitude to forgiveness, and it does seem to me that this illustrates that this book is for more than just the leaders, isn't it? It's for everybody.
It is. If you have any spiritual influence over anyone, and every believer is a minister wherever God has planted them, vocationally, bivocationally, volunteer, whatever role. I believe this book can speak to you and encourage you. The issue with forgiveness is oftentimes we become myopic and we just see exactly what's right in front of us. And the challenge, therefore, is to pull back and see the eternal perspective of what God's doing in the instance. And oftentimes we struggle with that because we get stuck in self-condemnation. And one of the things I do in the book, I have an individual application at the end of each chapter. And at the end of the chapter on forgiveness, I have a practice there, practice relieving self-condemnation. The goal is not to forgive yourself. We get stuck there. And what happens is when we get stuck spiraling and trying to forgive ourselves, it's just a pattern of self-condemnation that we get stuck in. So rather than forgiving yourself, what I coach others to do is live in the forgiveness you already have through Jesus Christ. How do you live in that forgiveness? Some may say it's semantics. Forgive yourself. Well, it's a mindset shift. It's a reframing and understanding that Christ has already forgiven me. I have the privilege of being under that grace. And because I have received grace, therefore I have grace to extend to others.
Well said. I might just mention, too, Byron was talking about how practical it is. Each section ends with individual application, and so that's good for the individual. Then you have teamwork, because I know a lot of our listeners say, well, this might be something I could use in a small group study or something like that. Then a section on Fix Your Eyes on Jesus. So each one of these is there. And Byron, if nothing else, as I go through these bullet points and everything else, I see that there are times when Eric goes from preaching to meddling in my life. What do you think? And you certainly have said that about the way in which he's been a coach for you.
That's right. You know, I was with someone who founded a ministry long ago, 40-something years of ministry, just this last week. And he was confessing to the men that we're training and the men that he works with that he used to see such things as psychobabble.
Yes.
We've all heard that.
Yes.
But I think it's gone out of style. And thank God that he's bringing people like Eric and concepts like this. And again, this is theologically based. So it's not just somebody coming in and laying down Freud or Jung on somebody. This is the kind of thing that now, if you are on a team, say you're on a church staff, and that's what this is based on. There was a gap that was created by someone who left, and it was very difficult. And so his work on that went very deep. Of course, this was your doctoral dissertation,
Right.
Dr. Willis. And but in every situation, like we had a Sunday school where the church decided to merge two groups. Well, there was a lot of, I wish I had this book at the time. At any stage of any group development, with any team, there's going to be conflict. And we've read a book together in a ministry you and I share, Kerby, at Probe. It's one of the top management book in the world, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team.
That's right.
And the thesis seems to be that if we're having a meeting, why aren't we arguing? We could have just gotten a memo. So learning how to argue, how to reconcile, and how to, again, as Dr. Willis said, forgive oneself, but actually just live in the forgiveness that's been bought to us at such a precious price. That's worth the book itself.
Again, we could camp out on relationship, but I thought at least cover the other two. Sure. One of those is meaning. And in ministry, meaning should be your strongest suit, you say. And sometimes people in ministry struggle with a lack of purpose. And so in some respects, you're reminding us, especially for our leaders, but I think it's true as well. I meet a lot of aimless people where I'd ask, well, what do you think your goal is for the next year or so? And they look at me like I've got two heads because they've never really thought about putting together a set of goals or a set of purpose or meaning. And that's really key if you're going to be rooted and resilient.
And that's exactly right, Kerby, because hope and optimism are critical for your personal meaning, which we attach meaning to the things we think are important. As followers of Christ, what's the most important thing? It is Christ himself. And the hope that we have is an anchor to our soul. Hope is for the present. And it is that hope in the present through our relationship with Christ that gives us meaning in the now. And meaning applies to not just vocational preference and pursuit. Meaning connects directly to someone bigger and larger than we are. It is, what is God's purpose? What's God's agenda for mankind? It's restored and redeemed relationship with God. That's Christ's purpose. So what's our meaning attached to that?
You know, that's excellent. One of the other things that God is doing, besides norming for the Christian life, good Christian biblical psychology, is the fact that what you said is becoming more known. It seems like the body of Christ goes through waves of reaction and overreaction.
True.
And then reaction and overreaction in the other direction. So here. You know, the thing I'm specifically meaning is that there's a narrative, there's a story. So the term narrative has been hackneyed. You hear it all the time. It's whatever's being said by whoever about whatever. But the real meaning of the big story of God is what Dr. Willis just spoke of. There is something bigger than us going on, and it was going on before we got here. But that doesn't minimize our part in that big story. So again, I found the book helpful in the fact that it's really, the scope of it is amazing. You've got, again, we could, like you said, spend forever on forgiveness. That is huge. I find that Matthew 18 is very underused and misunderstood. Mm-hmm. But it's also very broad in the sense that we just spoke of.
One of the things we do want to talk about after the break is achievement. But even as we get into that before the break, I thought it was interesting, Eric, that you spent some time saying, well, here's the traditional view of and then here's the biblical view. And the problem is, first of all, when we're in ministry, many times, whether it's your board, whether it's other staff members, whether it's your spouse, we tend to measure based upon the world standards. And that's understandable. So in some respects, what you are wanting to do is help us redefine what achievement means before we even get there. And that's the other part of that PERMA, the A for achievement, isn't it?
It is. Achievement, implies metrics, something measurable, right? And so when we talk about achievement as believers, I want us to first filter through a spiritual understanding of achievement.
Yes.
Rather than take on our primary as the world's standards of measurements. We've heard this in ministry leadership. Yes, we count the number of people in the seats. Yes, we have to engage the metrics. I want to make a distinction that the church specifically, and ministry organizations as well, are both an organization in need of metrics that are measurable and an organism where the Holy Spirit is at work, and we should allow that work to happen.
Let's take a break. We'll come back and talk a little bit more about that. And if you'd like to join us, 1-800-351-1212. But I suspect most of you just want to sit back and listen, and we'll be back right after this.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, talking about the book Rooted and Resilient, A Minister's Guide to Thrive. We also have a link to reclaimleadership.org. Might point you to some of the other books as well. Breathing Space, A Respite for Ministry Leaders in Sacred Conflict, Resolution Skills for the Follower of Christ. So lots of great resources. But Eric, let me come back to you for just a minute, because we measure achievement differently in the world than we should measure it in terms of ministry.
We do, and it requires an assessment. So what I provide at the end of this chapter on achievement is helping you find the rhythm in the goals that you've set. And so a quick self-assessment: are your goals currently weighted heavily toward organizational achievement, which means budgets, programs, the metrics that we keep, or are they in rhythm with the organism goals, the spiritual and the relational goals? And I challenge folks to identify one goal in your weakest category to focus on this next quarter. And to have a coach come alongside to help process that.
And you're one of those coaches. So again, if people would want to contact you, find out more about your books, maybe get started, get the assessment, there's a video for you to watch. There's all sorts of ways in which you can connect up. And most importantly, contact us if somebody would maybe want to have you come in and kick off a program. I was just thinking, Byron, that most men's programs, most men's ministries need a little bit of help, and this might be something that would kick it off. Or if you have an outreach to all sorts of pastors in your community, this would be great to bring him in to speak, don't you think?
I think that would be a beautiful thing. And I think it would really put momentum behind the idea that I, too, am a minister. Most people, you started talking at the very beginning of the program about disqualification. I see that especially in men, and I see women trying to figure out their roles. But we each are qualified, and we each are called and commissioned. And so I just took a box of books up to another state with a bunch of guys who are committed to helping men learn how not to be disqualified, but to walk in that newness of life, which also means to have the power to help other people. So ever since then, it was really well received. I've been thinking, okay, my Sunday school leader, those people over there who do ministry in the church that don't get thought of very much, but who are actually leaders. So, it's really one of those books. We give people books at graduations. We give people books about marriage and parenting. This is a book about ministry, but ministry with a small m.
Mm-hmm. And again, there are some great opportunities because you have a place where you can actually minister to leaders. You have a place where you have on the website retreat for couples. Mm-hmm. You have some things like sabbatical coaching, which I had never even thought of before, even a recalibration retreat. So talk about the whole range of things that you have been making available. This book is maybe the good entry point, but there are just all sorts of other things that you make available to individuals.
Absolutely, with the purpose of coming alongside to, again, infuse hope and biblical perspective. Coming alongside those elders, deacons, Sunday school teachers, missionaries, pastors, those with spiritual influence, just as a little reminder of the call on your life and heart. The recalibration retreats are one-day intensives where you're not required to come to us. That's an option if you'd like here in the Dallas area, but we go to you within a 90-mile radius to pour into you for a day.
And again, I love how it ends because you talk about the practice of gratitude, fueling a positive ministry, the anchor of hope, sustaining engagement through the storms, the grace of forgiveness, mending invisible wounds of ministry, which I know is one thing that you focused a lot of time and attention on, the vision of optimism, finding meaning in every season, and of course the last one, rooted and resilient leader, a lifelong framework for thriving. If we really want to have thriving, we want to have human flourishing, we want to have churches flourishing. Byron, that's what this book's all about, isn't it?
It really is. And those are catchwords. But again, as I've said 14 times already, the pragmatics are very usable. It's not the obvious stuff. It's not just principles that don't trickle down into the what to do. Especially, look at this last part, daily rhythms for thriving. Consider the SAVED acronym for daily routine. Let me just go through that. Silence and solitude. There's a lot about that available these days. Affirmations. Read and meditate on one or two passages of Scripture that remind you of who you are in Christ. So there's the identity factor that is so huge. John Mark Comer and others are all about that. Mm-hmm. Visioning. Allow the Lord to remind you of the mission and vision He's given you for life and ministry. That's coaching stuff. We all need to know that we too are part of that larger story and that we have agency. We can make things happen. Everybody. Exercise. Can seem optional, like you say here. 30 minutes of moving, we've got to have it.
You better, yeah.
And then development, pursue development. I am getting two kinds of coaching right now. And I'm giving myself permission to spend the money to be able to do in God's kingdom what aligns with my passions, my experience, my skill sets that He's given me with people's great need.
Well, again, Eric, if people want to contact you, there's a way in which they can do so. We have a link to reclaimleadership.org. If they want to get a book, matter of fact, I think most people are going to buy two. They're going to buy one for themselves and one to give to their pastor, their Sunday school teacher, whatever, and that is the case. But if they want to contact you, they can go to reclaimleadership.org, can't they?
That is the place to find me. Yes, sir.
Let me just, before we wind down for today, mention that, of course, over these last few days, we have been raising funds for our fiscal year end. And if you find yourself saying, I appreciate what you do, you're really trying to address some of these very important issues, whether it is, as we'll be talking about next hour, socialism, whether it's the whole issue of abortion, which we'll talk about with Save the Storks, and a variety of other issues, or in this case, just making sure that you are going to live the godly life that you should live and certainly have meaning and certainly apply principles of hope and gratitude and forgiveness. We certainly encourage you to join with us at Point of View. We are, again, encouraging you to go to the website, and if you scroll down to about halfway, you'll see a banner that says Restoring America's Godly Heritage, and then you'll see there's a place where you can give a one-time gift, or some of you might want to give a monthly gift, and that certainly is helpful because our bills come in monthly and our gifts come in monthly. It matches up pretty well. And as we go to a break, you might like to talk to someone. We'll still have some staff listening for that phone to ring. That number is 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. Still have a little bit of match money on the table because of some generous donations that were there. So it's a dollar for dollar match, and we would greatly appreciate your gift and, in a sense, put us over. But Eric, thank you for joining us today. First time I've met you. Maybe we can have you do a program again as we get a sense of how some of these things have been used even in our own listening audience, because there are, I think, going to be some people that are going to be contacting you. And Byron, thank you for recommending a book that I did not know a thing about, and thank you for bringing it today here on Point of View.
This is fun, isn't it?
Thank you, Kerby.
Yeah. So again, one last time, let me encourage you. We have a link to Reclaim Leadership. There's a place that you can click on the button that says Get Started. Scroll down a little bit further. You will see information about Eric. You will see a video, which is actually fairly lengthy, that will give you a chance over about 18-minute period to understand what it's all about. And of course, if you find yourself saying, I know some people that would benefit from this, maybe you could also click on that button there that allows us to send the link to this to maybe a pastor, a Sunday school teacher, or other that needs to learn to that. Or, of course, they can go to the Facebook feed, or, of course, they can go to YouTube, and they can find it there since we had our guest in studio. But take the time, get a copy of the book, take the time to pass this on to others, apply it to your life. We'll take a break, come back with more right after this.
It was not that long ago that censorship appeared to be almost inevitable. Free speech was being attacked and strangled in many places, and some of us wondered if this was the end. But now, many feel a new sense of hope, a chance for a fresh dawn. Let me caution you, now is not the time to relax. It's a time to press forward, to use this fresh opportunity to proclaim and learn how to apply truth to current issues. By the fact you're here, listening right now, that tells me that you recognize the vital role Point of View plays as a voice of truth. For more than 50 years, we've informed and equipped people who have made a real difference. And when you give to Point of View today, you breathe life into what can be a new golden era for the truth. Please, take a moment right now and invest in truth. Visit pointofview.net or give it 1-800-347-5151. That's pointofview.net. Click in now or call 1-800-347-5151. Point of View will continue after this.
Thank you, Kerby. I really appreciate your program. You cover a lot of issues that a lot of us think about, I'm sure. And this is the first time I've ever called in, so I appreciate your input, too.
Oh, I thank God for what you're doing on Point of View. You guys have more influence across this country than I believe any of them in terms of tackling the issues and getting the truth out to Americans. It's getting to the point where truth just is bottled up on every hand. Every time you turn around, there's another big bottleneck against truth. I hope your listeners realize what Point of View is doing and supports Point of View in every possible way you can.
You know, I can't go to Washington. I can't do those things, so the only way that I can help is the way that God has provided for me, and to give some of that back to you guys. So, like you said, partnering with Point of View, because, you know, you can't do it alone. Thank you very much for what you guys do. Believe me, it's a needed thing, and I just hope everybody certainly would get on the bandwagon with you.
Point of View Radio Talk Show.
Hi, this is Kerby Anderson. Each day we take on the tough issues and provide a biblical perspective to them. The topics we cover are wide-ranging: apologetics, theology, prophecy, creation and evolution, intelligent design, marriage, family, child-rearing, the millennial generation, trends in society, politics, economics, business, religious liberty, the Constitution, public policy, foreign policy, military policy, tensions in the Middle East, abortion, homosexuality, pornography, sexual ethics, media, technology, history, and America's godly heritage. We talk about anything that affects your faith, your family, or your freedom. So don't go anywhere, because Point of View continues right now.
Across America, live. This is Point of View. And now, Kerby Anderson.
Second hour today, we're going to spend some time talking about the pro-life issue. And of course, since its very beginning, Pro Ministries, Point of View, all sorts of other organizations, Right to Life, have all focused on this idea of, again, encouraging individuals to be pro-life and recognize that oftentimes you have abortion-minded women that need some kind of encouragement to know that they're not alone. And so we've focused on things like women's health clinics, pregnancy resource clinics, also talked about some of these mobile medical clinics, and more recently recognizing that some of these individuals are going to be using chemical abortion. We need to reach them maybe through digital platforms. So there are a number of different ways over the years that we've really wanted to reach out. And that's why I'm excited to spend some time talking about Save the Storks. SaveTheStorks.org is the website, and we are privileged to talk for a while with Diane Ferraro, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Save the Storks, an organization that is really looking to ensure women and families that they would receive a comprehensive support during pregnancy and even during parenthood. It also allows for developing all sorts of collaborative partnerships with other pro-life groups, churches, community organizations, and the rest. So, Diane, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Kerby, thank you so much for having me. What a beautiful introduction. It was spot on.
Well, again, my wife will tell you I probably speak at more pregnancy resource Senate banquets than almost anything else. When we go out and go to some of the places where you have radio stations, I try to go and visit some of the clinics. But also, of course, you are very much involved in the mobile clinics. And I think, if nothing else, that's a good way to start. I can remember a time before we had ultrasound and then after. And when a woman who is abortion-minded sees her baby, that changes everything, doesn't it?
It absolutely does, and that's what our mobile medical clinics are known for. We go out into communities across the United States. In fact, we have 109 mobile medical clinics, which I like to call vessels of divine deliverance. And when a woman steps on board one of our mobile medical clinics, she sees her baby on the ultrasound, hears the heartbeat, and 3 out of 4 times she chooses life for her baby. It's such a miracle, and it's such a blessing, and what an honor to do this in the name of the Lord.
Well, and one of the things that we've talked about before, of course, with this advent of chemical abortion, is it used to be that if there was an abortion clinic, a Planned Parenthood clinic or something like that, we've had many guests on this program that have been able to be on the sidewalk and sidewalk council and maybe talk to those women. But again, those venues are changing rather dramatically because they may not be going to an abortion clinic. They may be getting pills through the mail, or they may be thinking about that. So instead of waiting for them to come to us, you have a program to go to them, don't you?
We absolutely do, and what you said is right. In fact, the tragedy of the abortion pill now means that 64% of women are taking the abortion pill at home. They're not getting any kind of counseling. They're not having any medical intervention. They're not seeing their baby on the ultrasound. Many of these women are taking the abortion pill without even knowing how far along they are, which is so detrimental to the health of the mom, and of course it's taking that life of the baby. Where our ministry comes in is we have a 24-hour digital platform called foreverywoman.org, And what we're doing is we're using this digital platform to reach women who are doing Google searches and finding really false information about the abortion pill, that it's easy, that it's, it's harmless, that it's like taking aspirin, and all of these false narratives out there that they will find with Google and with AI that's being served up to them. They're taking the abortion pill thinking it's nothing more than a Tylenol, unfortunately. And what we're able to do with For Every Woman is we're able to intervene. We're able to make sure we can get truth to that woman who's doing an online search. Again, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. We will then connect her with online nurses. We will connect her with the local pregnancy center. We get them appointments on our mobile medical clinics because we want that woman to absolutely be introduced to that baby that is growing inside of her. We want her to understand that it is absolutely a baby. It's not a clump of cells. She has a human being that she has conceived, and we want her to know the truth. But we do this with love and compassion, and we do it with medical professionals across the country who are there to really love on that mom, make sure she knows how supported she is, that there are resources for her, just like you said, Kerby, not only during the pregnancy, but if there's any concern she has about being a parent or if she's afraid she can't be a parent, we are going to introduce her to adoption resources because adoption is such a beautiful choice when that mother doesn't feel that she's ready to parent. We want her to make an informed choice, but that informed choice should absolutely be to parent or to find a couple to adopt her child, never to abort her baby. We don't want her to live with a lifetime of regret.
Again, if you would like to know more, you can go to savethestorks.org. And again, I would have to say, Diane, that some people might say, well, I'm just hearing about this for the first time. I was fortunate that many, many years ago, the person that was helping us with fundraising at Point of View first told me about Save the Storks because he was involved. And again, that was very helpful. And then even more recently, I mentioned Pro Ministries a minute ago because I had one of the guests from there. We used to be in Suite 2000 in the Hope Center, and then we moved from Suite 2000 to 2050. And who moved into Suite 2000? Well, Save the Storks. So whether it's Point of View or Probe, I've had a very long connection to Save the Storks, but I suspect some people are unfamiliar with that. So can you give us a little of the history?
I absolutely will, and what a beautiful full circle moment this is. I've had a lot of those this week, Kerby. Yes, Save the Storks started back in 2012. We had a single, what we called a stork bus, and it was a gutted Mercedes-Benz, really like a van that you see with people who are going camping. They turn it into a, really a beautiful camper van. But what we did is we turned the first one into a women's health clinic on wheels. And that first one really just ignited America. We just inspired people to support this ultrasound on wheels that would go out to meet women where they were at. And we've had such a beautiful relationship with sidewalk advocates, with churches. We just recently launched a mobile medical clinic in partnership with Catholic Charities and Marisol Health here in the Denver metro area. We are still bringing the mobile medical clinic across the country because we know now more than ever with the abortion pill, we need to get services to that woman. And in fact, if that woman has already taken the first abortion pill, I'm so proud of what our partners are doing because they're bringing abortion pill reversal out to the communities. So no mother has to feel like she can't reverse that decision. And again, this is something that you won't find on Google. They really dismiss what the abortion pill reversal can do. In fact, one of our partners is in a lawsuit right now against the state of California and the Attorney General. They're basically saying the thousands of lives saved by abortion pill reversal aren't worth anything. And of course, believe differently, and we're going to keep fighting for these preborn babies and making sure that mothers know the truth and that they are given that ultrasound no matter where they are in the country.
Let's take a break, and when we come back, we'll talk about, in fact, you could go to Save the Storks right now. There is a map, and we'll talk about that since we broadcast all over the country. You can see whether or not you have one of these units in your particular community. Some states have quite a number, others need some, so we'll talk about that right after this.
This is Viewpoints with Kerby Anderson.
Chris Reese is the managing editor of the Worldview Bulletin newsletter. He was on my radio program recently to talk about his article, Resurrection and the Fear of Death. In discussing the importance of the resurrection to the Christian faith, he later turns to the futility that secular philosophers experience in attempting to find meaning in life. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul describes what the gospel consists of by listing two foundational elements. Christ died for our sins, and he was raised on the third day. Both events happened in accordance with the Scriptures. This was an early creed used by believers that Paul included in the letter. Chris Reese goes on to quote from secular philosophers who don't believe in God and don't believe in the resurrection of Jesus. Naturalist philosopher Alex Rosenberg answers some of the basic philosophical questions in this way. What is the purpose of the universe? There is none. What is the meaning of life? Ditto. Why am I here? Just dumb luck. Is there a soul? Are you kidding? Another physician talks about trying to resolve his fear of death intellectually, but concludes that it can't be done. Atheist professor Andrew Stark argues that after all the reasoning and all the rationales, I still desperately prefer to be a conscious, healthy human being than a corpse. Who wouldn't? Of course, the resurrection of Jesus does provide hope. The Apostle Peter declares that God has given us a living hope through the resurrection of Jesus Christ from the dead, that your faith and hope are in God. We should be grateful that our hope rests in the historical fact of the resurrection, and this should stimulate all of us to share the good news with others. I'm Kerby Anderson, and that's my point of view.
Go deeper on topics like you just heard by visiting pointofview.net. That's pointofview.net. You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Continue our conversation for a few more minutes with Diane Ferraro. Again, she is Chief Executive Officer for Save the Storks. Go to savethestorks.org. One of the buttons there is, what is a stork bus? And I thought we might talk about that for just a minute because you have over 100 buses in 35 different states. And, of course, we broadcast all over the country. So our listeners in California, there's more than 5. They have it broken down to 5 or more. California, Texas, Tennessee, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, some others where you have, anywhere from between 1 and 4. But also I see that there are some states where there aren't any. And there's an opportunity for people to, first of all, find what might already exist in their state. But there's also a place where people can click on a button that says, I'd like to launch a bus. And if we're going to be, Diane, effective in reaching the abortion-minded woman who's convinced that the abortion pill or an abortion clinic is the only answer to her unplanned pregnancy, we're not going to be effective. And these buses and these mobile units, I think, are very important. And I think they're kind of on the cutting edge of what we need to be doing right now in terms of what is happening in the abortion movement.
You're absolutely right. In fact, these state-of-the-art mobile medical clinics sadly were copied by Planned Parenthood a few years ago at the Democratic Convention. They had completely copied one of our stork buses, with the exception of they didn't have an ultrasound because, again, the abortion industry doesn't want the woman to meet her baby or hear the baby's heartbeat. So we definitely need more of these mobile medical clinics across the country. We do have states that are still lacking a stork bus or a mobile medical clinic. And like you said, if your audience wants to go to savethestorks.org, they can see that map and look at the states where we are in desperate need of a mobile medical clinic to provide life-affirming care to women.
One of the things you do is collaborative partnerships with churches and leaders and things of that nature. We just a while ago, before you came on, had Dr. Eric Willis and Byron Barlowe talking about leaders and pastors, and there's a button there to talk about church partnerships. And I thought that was very good because you can click on I'm a pastor or a church leader, I'm a church member, maybe a sermon outline. Now, for many of our listeners there for the first time, maybe hearing about Save the Storks, so they might say, okay, I maybe need to be educated a little bit on this, or I'm ready to take some action. What do I do next? And you really have kind of a walkthrough on anything and any level that maybe a local church or a local Christian organization, maybe even a local pregnancy center might want to know about. So walk us through for that for just a minute, because we do have lots of pro-life individuals that listen to this program, but they just want to know, okay, what do I do next if I want to get involved with you?
Absolutely. We definitely have some amazing resources. So we have one that's called the START course, and this is a series of short videos that anyone at the church can go through. We encourage church groups like a women's group or a youth group, even a home Bible study, to go through the START course and then talk to their pastor about how they can bring this to the entire church congregation, which then helps them become a true pro-life church in the community. And this is a free resource on our Save the Storks website. We also have Dare to be a Dad, which we wrote in partnership with Matt Hammett. He was the lead singer of Sanctus Real, wrote a beautiful song called Lead Me. And this Dare to be a Dad program, it's a 7-day devotional for men, and this is completely free on our website. And we're so excited about this because we know that 89% of the time when a father steps up and says, I'm willing to parent this child, when a woman finds herself in an unplanned pregnancy, 89% of the time that woman will choose life for her baby. So we really feel it's so important to equip and empower men to be fathers. In fact, Mariners Church out in Newport Beach, California, they had their entire congregation of 20,000 members go through Dare to be a Dad, and they're now helping the Orange County Rescue Mission with our mobile medical clinic, with medical volunteers, with people who are helping fathers become fathers, and then they have a mom program as well. So these resources are so important because we understand that for some pastors it might be a little scary, especially in states where abortion is prevalent. They might feel, well, we don't want to scare away the congregation. We don't want to upset the local, political community. However, we know that pro-life is not just a political issue. It is absolutely a scriptural issue, and it's something that we need to stand up for. So women in our community understand the sanctity of life. And by stepping in and going through these resources for the churches, we want churches, again, to be compassionate and loving and make sure that the community knows that their local church is a safe place for that woman when she is facing an unplanned pregnancy, so she can go to them and be encouraged and supported and just really loved on so she can meet Christ and that her child can grow up in a loving church and they will have an eventual relationship with Christ as well. It's just a beautiful full circle way for churches to get involved and really serve women in their community.
Let me again encourage you to go to Save the Storks and move around, because here's one that I found that wouldn't necessarily be obvious. If you click on media, there's a whole section that relates to just what Diane was talking about. There's a section, Why Fathers Matter, with Banks Ramsey. Also, a father's support in an unplanned pregnancy. And this is an important part of that, because oftentimes when I do speak at a pregnancy resource center banquet, we'll be talking about what we can do, and most of the people on staff are women. But I said, men, there's still a place for you, and that is to minister to and reach out to the other men. Also, of course, there's all sorts of things that they can do. And you have a whole section that I think was very helpful that people might not be aware of that talks about the importance of men. And you're right. If the parents support, if the father of an unplanned pregnancy supports, abortion is less likely. And so in some respects, we need to not just reach out to the abortion-minded woman, we need to reach out to the men as well. And that's a section that you might not necessarily know is there, but if you click on media, you will find, again, some of the outreach that you do to the men.
Perfect. I'm so glad you mention that. We do often cover stories from the fatherhood perspective. And again, the more men we can get to these beautiful articles that will inspire them and just let them know they're not alone. And if we can encourage the older and wiser men in the church to really pour into the young men in the youth groups and before there is an unplanned pregnancy, because we know sadly that 40% of people sitting in the churches have had an abortion. I really believe if we can go to the media tab, if we can really have the older and wiser members of the congregation pour into younger people and just speak about the truth of what abortion does and how harmful it is, and how there are, so many regretful stories when someone makes that decision for an abortion thinking it's the best thing at the time, but that long term people do regret their abortion. And in fact, we've learned that it takes on average 27 years for someone to share their abortion story with someone else, to really get it out in the open and find that healing. That's a long time to suffer alone. And we know that our Savior really wants us to put it at the foot of the cross and seek help and seek the love and support of others in our community. And again, we have to, remove that bushel that's hiding the light and really let this light be exposed so the church can be a source of, again, love and just a safe place for anyone in the community who's had an abortion. And again, by doing that, it will show someone who's facing an unplanned pregnancy, of which every day there's thousands of women who are aborting their baby. Imagine if that church can be a source of comfort and light. So even someone who maybe doesn't belong to that church will say, I know that church does support women who are single moms, or they support fathers who might be a single parent. And that's how you start to, just get the good news out about the work of the church and the love of Jesus by reaching out to these single parents and people who are facing an unplanned pregnancy.
Again, just go to Save the Storks. You can find out more about the Save the Storks mobile medical clinics. Also, they have Save the Storks partner clinics. And then, of course, one of the things we've been talking about more and more here on Point of View, the digital ecosystem, where they can actually find out about care and just really holistic care. There's a place where you can donate. And the first step is, of course, just to go to SaveTheStorks.org. We have a link there. It's right next to, of course, the picture of Diane. And Diane, thank you for joining us today here on Point of View.
Thank you, Kerby. This has been a wonderful privilege, and I just thank you and wish you a very blessed 4th of July weekend.
Let me again encourage you to check out and see, maybe you have a clinic or a mobile clinic right there in your state, and if you don't, why not? You can certainly see if that would be something you could do there as well. So we'll go to the website at pointofview.net. You can find out more there. You'll also, of course, if you scroll down, see where we have the opportunity for you to give. And as we have come through our fiscal year end, we've been able to extend that till today. I guess we'll maybe even extend it till tomorrow, but we will only be on tape by tomorrow. So if you have not given and you would like to have your gift matched, go to the website, pointofview.net, or give us a call. That number is 800-347-5151. No gift is too small. No gift is too large. Put us over the top. We'd greatly appreciate it. We'll come back with some comments in the news right after this.
Many years ago, they began saying that we live in the information age. Well, today there is so much information coming at us from every direction. The hardest thing is to discern which issues are really important and how can I make a positive impact without wasting my time trying to figure out accurate information. Let me give you a suggestion to help with that. Visit pointofview.net. Look at the tabs across the top. Find the one named Viewpoints. Kerby Anderson and others on our team are constantly watching for news to identify those issues that you really need to know about. They boil things down in a brief summary, and then you can decide if it's something on which you want to learn more and get involved. Again, when you go to pointofview.net, click on Viewpoints, you'll see exactly what I mean. You'll see the issues that we are covering right now. And when you like what you see, I honestly think you will, you can slide on over, enter your email, and get them automatically sent to your inbox each day. That's it. Take a minute now, be informed. Pointofview.net, click on Viewpoints. Point of View will continue after this. You are listening to Point of View. The opinions expressed on Point of View do not necessarily reflect the views of the management or staff of this station. And now, here again is Kerby Anderson.
Back for a few more minutes. Let's, if we can, just kind of focus on a couple of things that have been happening this week. We will not be having our Friday weekend edition tomorrow. We'll be running a best tape, and I think you will appreciate those interviews. But since it is the day before 4th of July, we thought we would take it off, and I think most people are. I don't even see a lot of people in the garage near where this studio is, so I suspect a lot of people took off yesterday, and that is the case. But one more comment about this election in Colorado. We are talking about this Democratic Socialist Milad Quiros, who, interesting enough, is all of 29 years of age and is a former barista. Now, she does have a law degree and was basically kicked out of a law firm. So basically, she went from being a individual serving you coffee to now probably a person, there's pretty good likelihood she'll serve in the United States House of Representatives. There's a joke that's being going around saying, well, you better be nice to the people serving you coffee at Starbucks because they might be your next member of Congress, because there have been a few of those. And not to disparage people that are baristas, that's a way to support people. I'm not criticizing that. The point I'm making is that at the age of 29, I'm not sure how much I knew about the government and whether I was even equipped to actually serve in Congress, but here you go. And interestingly enough, she has, in her victory speech, said, we will not wait to reject corporate PACs like AIPAC, which, of course, is one that's associated with Jewish people. No, we will not wait to end the genocide in Palestine. Of course, there's no genocide in Palestine, but nevertheless, AIPAC is not a collection of monsters, according to Zohran Mamdani and others. But this, I think, just shows you the obsession right now with those individuals in one way or another that are part of the Democratic Socialist of America. But again, you have to understand that she was able to unseat a representative that had served 15 terms in Congress, 30 years. In other words, when she first served in Congress, Milad Quiros had not been born yet. But nevertheless, other Democrats in the House also were ones that voted for a Lebanon War Powers resolution on Tuesday because they wanted to be critical of Israel. So sometimes what you're having is an already very liberal member of Congress being replaced by an even more liberal member of Congress. And so, as she points out, there really is almost a crusade right now to handcuff Israel from being able to do anything to defend itself. And one of the people that was talking about how these individuals who are basically holding to communist ideas is they said, you know, when you look back at what was called the Red Scare. This happened in the 1950s, and people that invoke, if you will, the specter of McCarthyism and red baiting and all that. But if you look at this, that's pretty much what you've ended up with now. Those individuals who were being criticized for being members of the Communist Party, now you have these individuals that are members of the Communist Party, or at least members of the so-called Democratic Socialist of America. And if you look at the survey that was conducted just the other day by, and again, this was just looking at the New Jersey chapter of the Democratic Socialists. So it, I think, is representative of the national, but again, recognizing that this quote comes from the New York Times columnist Thomas Edsall, in which he said this movement is as white as it is red. He said nearly 4 out of 10, 39.3%, nearly 4 out of 10 of these Democratic Socialists also identify as anarchists, followed by Marxist, 35.7%, and then 10.7% of Democratic Socialists. So the point is, they may come under the banner. There's this umbrella called Democratic Socialists, but when you go and really look at them, a very significant number, 4 out of 10, actually identify really as anarchist, but that was a home in which they found themselves. Another 3.5 out of 10 identify themselves as Marxist. And so you only come down to 1 out of 10 that really identify themselves truly as democratic socialists. So the point I'm making, and the point that certainly Noah Rothman is making, is we quote, he says, don't have to pretend that anarchism and Marxism are just another flavor of progressivism. They're not. Nor are we obliged to take seriously the mainstream Democrats who insist that the radical left is nothing to worry about. That said, this isn't just a New York thing. It isn't just something about Benjamin Netanyahu or Israel or just a populist thing. This is, as he says, an anti-American thing. And so these are individuals that have a very strong anti-American bias. And even though they will come under the banner, under the umbrella of democratic socialist, the reality is most of them are anarchists. What do we mean by anarchy? I want to get rid of everything. They're real good at tearing things down. Dennis Prager has been on this program many times before, and you might pray for him because of his accident. But he points out that leftists are usually good at tearing things down, not real good at building things up. And so they're all about tearing down this country, and they say so in some of the most remarkable surveys that have been posted, even I say, even in the New York Times. Let's go on, though, because Matt Vesto points out that if you're looking at why are we seeing so many of these individuals turning to socialism in these primaries, he's got a couple of reasons. First, he says the Democratic base is overwhelmed with overeducated elites. Now, nothing wrong with having graduate degrees. I have 2 of them, so I understand that. But there is a bias, a very definite bias in that regard. And so those who are educated in various social sciences, in law, government, they are going to be much more likely to be your radicals. Number 2, he says, the socialists have been really skilled at hiding their bizarre agenda items. I'll run through that list again in just a minute. And then the third reason comes from Michael Schellenberger, who we've quoted before, who, by the way, is a left, but not as radical as these leftists. But he says, nothing else, there is, if you will, kind of an irony in their rejecting the liberal agenda, and that's causing them to move further to the left, which is really kind of odd. So the other day, they put together the program of the Democratic Socialist of America. And you can find this in this article, but you can also find it in a very good article written a while back by Dr. Merrill Matthews when he was cataloging all the things that were said at the most recent convention of the Democratic Socialists. But here's the short list since I'm coming to a break. Total defunding and abolition of the police, of jails and prisons, ending the independence of the Supreme Court and the entire executive branch, making them subordinate to Congress, expropriating property from capitalists and delivering it to the working class, socializing energy production, allowing surgeons to sterilize children and adolescents in an effort to change their sex, a return to Joe Biden's open borders policy, and the decriminalization of illegal camping and open-air drug use. Yes, that comes from the Democratic Socialist of America. And again, most of these policies are not very popular. Even during the time of Black Lives Matter, only 15% of Americans wanted to abolish the police force. 74% of Americans approve of the separation of powers. 90% favor co-equal branches. Only 9% want one branch to hold more power. 81% of Americans view free enterprise in a positive positive way. Only 39% view socialism positively. And even of that 39%, a lot of them are thinking about Scandinavia, which is not the case. And only 37% of the public think doctors should be able to give drugs to or operate on minors in an effort to change their gender. And of course, 70% support closing the border, and 69% support limiting those who can claim asylum. Every one of these policy platforms and comments by the Democratic Socialists of America is unpopular. But those are the individuals right now that oftentimes are winning some of these primaries. So there's a lot of work to do, and that's what we focus some of our time and attention on here at Point of View. As you go to the break, you can read this whole piece, Socialism and Anarchism. You can also scroll down and make your gift to Point of View. Again, I'd love to hear from you as well. 1-800-347-5151. We'll take a break, come back with some final comments right after this.
You're listening to Point of View, your listener-supported source for truth.
Back once again, I'm kind of sad that we won't have a Friday weekend edition because some of the things we were going to talk about will be postponed to the following Friday. And one of those that was, I thought, very interesting that came from our friend Dr. Merrill Matthews, who unfortunately won't be there for the roundtable, but he did send to me a very interesting piece about how Iran plans to seize the church, the Protestant church there in Iran. So we may get into what's going on in Iran internally fundamentally, of course, we've been talking about the war, but there's some other issues as well. So we will indeed talk about that. And I'd be remiss if I did not mention that my commentary today is actually entitled The Fear of Death. And really what it is hearkening back to a very good piece by Chris Reese. Chris has been on the program many times. He's the manager and managing editor of the Worldview Bulletin newsletter. I subscribe to probably too many newsletters and too many news magazines, but I would put this one maybe near the top of the list. If for no other reason, it has been very helpful for us to identify some really good guests that Steve, my producer, has found, but also it just has some really great pieces there as well. And one of the things that Chris Reese was doing, of course, is talking about the fact that our hope is in, of course, the resurrection of Jesus. And as we talked about the other day with my guest yesterday, when you go to 1 Corinthians 15, you see, of course, two foundational elements. Christ died for our sins, and he was raised on the third day in accordance with the Scriptures. And we know that that was an early creed that was used, so that even predates when Paul writes that to the church in Corinth. But one of the things I thought was very helpful is you might want to also go to this, not only because you know some of the basic theology, but Chris Reese then took the time to quote from some secular philosophers. One I'll just use is Alex Rosenberg, who said, well, here's how you answer the great philosophical questions of our day. What is the purpose of life? There is none. What is the meaning of life? Ditto. Why am I here? Just dumb luck. Is there a soul? Are you kidding? And these are the kinds of comments that you're getting even from these secular philosophers. So it's just a reminder, if nothing else, of the sadness in the world if you don't believe in the Bible. The sadness if you don't believe that there is life after death. Just the horror of actually what it means to be a secular-minded person in a secular society. And so, again, I just thought that this would be a very helpful commentary. And, of course, you will see the link to his original. And for those of you that might be interested, I would highly recommend getting a subscription to the Worldview Bulletin. But just before we wind down, just a quick comment or two by John Stossel. I saw the other day he was talking about these self-driving cars, and we will probably spend a lot of time here on Point of View talking about a lot of issues. I'll hold up, for example, our Outlook magazine called The AI Crisis, because whether you're talking about artificial intelligence, whether you're talking about robots, whether you're talking about self-driving cars, there's a lot to consider. But he points out, interestingly enough, and I had no idea the numbers were this high, that car accidents kill 100 Americans every day. But he says now there's a solution, self-driving cars. Well, you would think that that would be the case because now you have Google owns what is called Waymo, and some of you live in communities where you've already seen some of these Waymo self-driving cars. Perhaps some of you even gotten in a self-driving car. I think it'd be virtually impossible to get my wife into a self-driving car, but nevertheless, people have said that they have actually been much safer. Waymo makes the claim, but this is backed by other research, that when they actually have these self-driving cars, there's an 88% reduction in property damage and a 92% reduction in bodily injury claims. You might say, well, that's what they claim. Well, there is also this author that John Stossel interviews, Permissionless Innovation, which comes to the conclusion that 94% of all accidents are attributable to human error, and one of the ways to address that is, again, with self-driving cars. So who could be against it? Well, anybody that feels like they're representing taxi drivers or people that have Lyft or a variety of others, and Uber. And so he quotes from a state senator, interviews him, and they now have a law that says that motor vehicles shall not be operated by an automated driving system without a human driver seated behind the steering wheel and engaged in the task of driving. In other words, even if you're going to have a self-driving car, you have to sit in the seat and basically do some of the driving. And the argument by Louis Sepulveda is, again, the state senator, I cannot support something that's going to almost overnight lead to the loss of jobs of 100,000 people. First of all, that's not going to happen. You know it's not going to happen because some people will still want to have Uber, Lyft, taxis, whatever, and other people are going to want maybe to try a driverless car. And the bottom line is the researcher points out that one of the reasons we have car accidents is humans get drunk, humans get drowsy, humans get distracted. Matter of fact, a lot of humans with their cell phones are distracted. That's why we want robots, because they don't get drunk, drowsy, or distracted. And every once in a while, you'll hear a story about, in this case, a Waymo vehicle striking something. One was striking a child in California. But again, as he points out, that is John Stossel and others, these are at most really isolated incidents. The child wasn't injured and actually jumped behind a car. Anybody probably would have hit the child, a driver or a self-driving car. And again, if people are unaware, we have had some times in the past where technology has changed things. Typists, switchboard operators, elevator operators, they've lost jobs, but you know what? They found other jobs, sometimes even better jobs. So I think we'll continue to look at this issue of AI, robotics, and much more. But these are the kinds of things that we talk about on Point of View. If your church covers those, I doubt that you hear that from the pulpit of your churches, but maybe a Sunday school class addresses some of these issues ranging from AI to socialism and capitalism to even America's godly heritage. Great. But we cover those kinds of things every single day. So as I say goodbye for this week, let me once again mention that if you want to make a gift, this would be a great time to do so. Scroll down to the button that says Give Now, or even though we're going off the air, you can give us a call at 800-347-5151, 800-347-5151. As we go into the 4th of July, recognize that it's going to be a great time to see fireworks, going to be all sorts of great celebrations. The state fair on the mall didn't work out so well, and a few other things. But nevertheless, some things have been a lot of fun. But I hope that even as we celebrate the 4th of July, I hope you, like us, you will celebrate the fact that we have been around for 250 years. And it was America's godly heritage that gave this country. Christian values were important in the founding of this republic. Wouldn't it make sense that Christian values are also necessary in the maintenance of this republic? I think you know the answer. For that, let me again thank Megan. I think she's going to go on a vacation and well-deserved. So certainly want to thank her for her engineering the program. We're going to have Doug with us next week. Looking forward to that. And of course, always thank Steve for producing the program. Enjoy the weekend. See you back here on Monday, right here on Point of View.
I'm sure that you've noticed that social media is now filled with information generated by AI. Dramatic descriptions of politicians and music stars supposedly making statements about a current issue, leaning into the microphone, looking into the lens, opponents silenced. It's powerful, it's riveting, and it's all lies. Even several national television networks were recently found using enhanced pictures, meaning manipulated, falsified, literally not giving a true picture. So many liars, so much deception. Where can we turn for truth? Right here, from Kerby and the team at Point of View. We need your support. Please join the Point of View Truth Team today with a monthly gift of $30 or more. Together, we can shine the light of truth and dispel the darkness and deception of this day. Give now at pointofview.net or call 1-800-347-5151, pointofview.net, and 800-347-5151. Point of View is produced by Point of View Ministries.